Welcome, everybody, to the VALR Podcast. I've got the great pleasure of introducing you to Matěj Žák, who is the CEO of Trezor. So very welcome to you, Matej. It's lovely to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Today, we're really just going to try to get to know you a little bit, Matej, and understand a little bit about Trezor, and then also to get into a little bit about the pros and the cons and kind of the philosophical and the practical elements of custody, self-custody versus hosting or having your coins on an exchange like VALR. Obviously, VALR is the largest crypto exchange in Africa by trading volume. We have a custodial wallet service for our customers. When they trade, we hold their coins. Trezor, as you'll describe to us just shortly, is a hardware wallet. And we'll really be just talking about the pros and the cons and really drawing upon your wisdom. So without further ado, Matej, tell us a little bit about who you are to start off with.
Okay, so I started working for Trezor some 5 years ago. I started actually as the first product manager of the company, because that was very much an engineering-based team. I think there were around 30 of us, and so I was the first to actually build the product team, because I really was the first product manager. Maybe to explain a bit what product managers do, it's a function basically that connects engineering, design, and basically product management is the function of these three plus business. So it's a design, engineering, and business. And product managers are responsible for making sure that the company is building the right features, the right products for the right customers. So that's ultimately what was my basically job. And ultimately, from a product manager, I then led the whole product team from the seat of head of product, and later on from a C-level position as a chief product officer as we grew as a company. Because we started, again, as I said, around 30, 40 people, and this year we are closing to actually 200. So in those 5 years, we grew quite a lot, which obviously makes us very happy, because that means we are serving more users and you're luring more people into self-custody of a hardware world, which is awesome. And so that's me. I really love making products. I guess I really enjoy it. I like the multidisciplinary sort of nature of product management, and my background is actually not tech at all. I started as a musician, so I studied music. So I switched to technology later on, because just I was interested into Bitcoin, because I was interested always in economics and sociology, and that kind of led me down the rabbit hole to Bitcoin.
Awesome. Out of curiosity, what music do you play, or what instruments, or what's your musical background there?
So I studied classical guitar, so that's from very early age. And these days I mostly play like in a jazz band, so with my buddies, as a hobby, basically. But I still like it. I enjoy it.
Awesome, great. And tell us a little bit about Trezor. You mentioned you've been there for 5 years. I believe the company is now over a decade old. So tell us a little bit about what Trezor is, what you guys do, and what your goals are.
Right. So we are the first company to actually build a hardware wallet out of the need of protecting private keys from Bitcoin. So maybe let me explain what those private keys are to begin with. So in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, you basically have something called private keys, and those are really, you can imagine it just like a physical key from your car or a house. So if you're given these keys away, somebody could potentially get into your car, drive it away, or steal your things from your apartment. So very much like that, digitally, you have private keys from Bitcoin and other coins, and those needs to be protected. And as a matter of fact, hardware wallets are the best in sort of protecting private keys from your Bitcoin. You can imagine those as very long Wi-Fi passwords that you need to hold very securely and dearly to your chest for not anybody to kind of steal them from you. That concept is basically called self-custody, meaning you are really the true owner of those keys, and you keep them in your own custody, in your own kind of hands. And Trezor hardware wallet is a specifically built device that helps you manage those keys and operate with those keys, sign transaction, etc., in a very easy way. So you don't have to be an engineer, you don't have to be PhD in Bitcoin or cryptography to do that. So that's basically what we are after, to make sure self-custody of your keys and coins is really it's very secure, but also very easy to use. And maybe just as because you mentioned the history of the company, so we were the first one to build the hardware wallet, but also we were the first one to create something called BIP39, which stands for Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. And this specific sort of technology or the protocol that now actually not just us, but all of our competitors and software wallet use is the way you transform those, as I said, Wi-Fi password, those private keys, into something that is very easy readable and very like a human readable format, which is basically those 12 or 24 words that you probably know or the listeners might know from using other wallets, where basically the wallet would ask you, okay, now create the backup of those private keys, write those words down, and that's really the backup of those private keys, as in you would create another key pair of of your physical keys from, for example, your flat. So that's a standard we invented those 10 years ago, and now everybody is using, and we are kind of innovating more and more other things we can talk about, but like that's sort of, I would say, the biggest impact we had for Bitcoin and the security of Bitcoin for all the users out there.
That's awesome. I mean, that's BIP39 is something that the entire industry now uses. We talk about seed phrases and those words. Maybe something to talk about, because I believe with BIP39, there's about a repository of about 2,000 odd words that you can choose from, right?
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit about, because sometimes if you're a layman, you say it's only 2,000 words, but it's, and you choose 12 to 24 words. How easy is it to guess somebody else's seed phrase? So what are some of the stats, if you have them offhand, of like, what are the chances of that actually happening?
Yeah, so I've been trying to, I actually calculated this a couple of times for some presentations, in conferences and stuff. And imagine, I don't know the exact number, but just as an order of magnitude, imagine the likelihood of the fastest computer in the world, like those would be like the supercomputers, but the likelihood of that computer guessing your seed phrase, it would take probably, let's say, like many orders of magnitude of the history of the whole universe for the computer to take all the time to be able to guess your seed phrase. So in other words, I calculated, and the number was like, I don't know, 50 digits or whatever. and the history of the universe is, I don't know, like 20 digits, or like, I think even less, right? So it's just a fraction of what would it take the computer to guess it. So in other words, it's extremely secure. So it's close to impossible for anybody to guess that, because even though as you said, the vocabulary list consists of 2,048 words, those are completely randomly selected, and basically, that makes it like extremely hard for anybody to guess, meaning basically impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've heard other analogies of like finding a grain of sand on a huge beach.
Exactly.
That's a particular one. So the chances are extremely low. Let's talk a little bit about kind of, we've got a wide audience of VALR and people that listen to the podcast. And so I'd love to just break it down into the different types of ways in which you can hold your keys. So obviously there's custodial, as I mentioned, which is you're actually asking a third-party institution like VALR to hold your keys for you. Pretty much all centralized exchanges are custodial, have custodial infrastructure for you. They hold your keys. But then in the non-custodial, you have hardware wallets, software wallets, paper wallets, etc. So maybe you can just take us a little bit around what are the non-custodial options that users have, and why should they think about having a hardware wallet specifically?
Correct. So I think the most used is probably something called software wallet, where, and I would even distinguish probably those two, where you can probably hold the keys or leave the keys somewhere online, like in a server, right? Like you could There are services or wallets where they would hold it for you, and I mean, technically you own it yourself, but it leaves those keys on in the cloud basically. So that's one option, and we can talk maybe about why it's not maybe the best option or why there are some risk with regards to that. Then there are wallets where those keys would be left on the storage of the device, for example, like your mobile phone, for example. But still, that phone is connected to the internet, so that's problematic as well. Because, and again, we can talk about it very briefly as well. And then we have a hardware wallet, which is a device that is specifically, again, the keys are stored in the device memory, but that device is not connected to the internet and is built specifically as a single-purpose device to store and protect those private keys. And out of these options, which are the most widely used, the hardware wallet is best in the way that exactly those keys never leave or are never sort of leaked online. So any malware or anything cannot get to those keys. And so that's why it's regarded as the most secure way to store the keys, because they're, anytime I go to talk at conferences and present our products or, whatever, or some talks, I always, dig up some statistics on the recent hacks of, these software wallets, the cloud services, etc. And there's always something. There's always like something that happened, next week, a week ago, or, like a month ago. There's always some new attacks where it is basically an attack surface for those keys, because the hackers could get to them more easily, or actually quite easily, as opposed to when you hold them on a hardware wallet. Again, that is a device that is specifically built, to protect those private keys, and those keys are never kind of leaked online or through like the users using the hardware wallet.
Absolutely. So a whole bunch of different wallets, from software wallets on your phone, actually holding the keys on your phone itself, to actually the hardware wallets, as you mentioned. To your point about compromises when it's online, or we've heard of, as you said, recently there have been WazirX recently had a big compromise in Indian exchange in India. About $230 million was compromised over there. So you do hear about these compromises. Are there similar compromises that you hear about with hardware wallets? What are the risks of having a hardware wallet?
Yeah, so I think the main difference between, for example, the attack you mentioned and the hardware wallet is the scale. So if the attacker gets to a database that is online, and you have a centralized database of your users' private keys, for example, they can really attack a huge amount of users, right? Because they can basically wipe accounts of many users, as opposed to when you have. So that's one, and I will talk about others. But like when you have hardware wallet, you basically, it's a very individual thing. You cannot really make a massive attack that would be like distributed for all these users, because it's virtually impossible or very impractical for the attackers, because you simply don't have any centralized like a honeypot, where you could steal these keys, because they live on the individual hardware wallets of those many users, all around the world. That being said, some disadvantages that you mentioned. I mean, in general, self-custody requires, I would say, some knowledge about basically what you are doing, because if I use the example again with those keys from your car, if you are a forgetful person, such as me, for example, just as a joke example, and I would leave my keys, like always on the table in the coffee place or whatever, that's probably not great for the security of my car, right? Because I would. So what I'm trying to say, I would need to build some practice of not, leaving those keys on the table. So if I take, and I'm just an example, stupid example of the car, but like with the private keys in Bitcoin, you have to practice some level of sort of security practices and privacy practices as well. So for example, it's not a great idea to boast about, where you store the backup from your private keys. Don't tell it to anybody. Don't make digital copies of those backups, because again, if you make a digital copy of their backup, then it's virtually again like somewhere in the online, and somebody could potentially attack it. don't probably boast about how much Bitcoin you have, because again, it's not great for your privacy, because then somebody could attack you because they would know, you have such amount, etc., etc. So I think self custody requires some conscience, both actually,
Caution. Yeah, caution. Yeah.
caution and conscience as well, in the sense like, so you are aware of what you are doing. So you have to be careful about that. And yeah, so I would say those could be regarded as some disadvantages. As long as
Absolutely.
you as a user don't want to care about this, then custody is probably a better option for you. But again, I think what we are trying to show to the world is like self custody can be very easy through the hardware wallet. There's nothing complicated about it.
Absolutely. A lot of people ask me, as the CEO of VALR, to say, what should I do? Should I leave my crypto with VALR, or should I take it off the platform? And what I often tell everyone, and I'd love to hear your views on this, is that there isn't one single answer for everybody. It depends on your technical knowledge, your know-how, your understanding of yourself, as you said, if you're forgetful or not. And I say, if you know what you're doing and you have your security practices intact, then by all means, take off your crypto from exchanges and custody it yourself, with the knowledge that there are still risks with whatever you choose, right? So you could still lose your coins if you misplace your key, lose your key, you don't have a backup, etc. And with VALR, for example, we have a dedicated cybersecurity team where all they're doing is trying to secure our funds and our customers' funds. But as you said, we're a much bigger target because we're a bigger pot of capital than a single user. So I always say there's always risk, whatever you choose. Understand the pros and the cons, and then select accordingly, according to what you want to do. We don't advise on what people should do. And I'm curious, as a hardware wallet provider yourself, do you say something similar, or are you guys advising everybody to go self-custodial? What is the messaging of Trezor to the public?
Yeah, so actually, thanks for the question. I like that you kind of ask this like transparently, because obviously I'm on the self custody side of the market.
Right.
So I would always advise like users to get into hardware wallets. But that being said, we also I'm not as strict about this, because I actually like what you said, like your answer. I mean, I subscribe to the idea of what you are saying. There's always some risks for sure. Also, as I said, with the education, you kind of need to know what you are doing in the self custody when you want to self custody coins yourself. And also, I think it's definitely a recommended practice if you are starting with Bitcoin and crypto. It's definitely a good idea to probably start on an exchange. Try to send a couple of transactions, kind of see what you are doing, and then when you perhaps percentage wise amass bigger amounts that will be really, let's say, painful for you to lose, or you might basically distribute the risk into like other solutions. So then we recommend, take it offline, take it to the hardware wallet, and self custody there. But again, I agree with the fact that there's always some risks, but with the side note that we as a hardware wallet company, we are really making sure that the hardware wallets are really easy to use. And we go to great lengths of making sure that they're really user friendly. So say customers in general don't have to worry about starting with the hardware wallets these days. I mean, it's and then of course like those 10 years ago, or even I would say 8 years ago, 5 years ago, it was much harder. But these days, us and our direct competitors, I think, are doing a much better job at making sure the hardware wallets are really easy to use.
Awesome, wonderful. One other aspect I wanted to just touch upon is obviously with people taking their coins with them to the grave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you guys are doing a lot of work in educating people, and I think you're also doing a lot of work in Africa, if I'm not mistaken, and elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But what are your thoughts, and what do you tell people about, if you have a hardware wallet, what are the best practices such that, if you've got a family, you've got kids, etc., and you've got some of your coins on a Trezor or another hardware wallet, what are the best practices such that if something happens to you, your family and your beneficiaries don't lose out by you taking your coins with you to the grave?
Right. So there are a couple options how to do that. So, or how to think about it. So I would maybe mention one innovation that we created as well, specifically for use cases such as this, which is, I mean, I mentioned the BIP 39, but we also created something called Slip 39, which basically creates sort of multiple shares of those of the backup of those private keys. So what then you can do as a user is, for example, create 5 shares of the seed phrase, and then create a threshold with which you need those shares to recover the master secret. So what that essentially means, as an example, you can create 5 shares, you can give it to your family members, and then if something happened to you, those family members could, at least, for example, 3 of those family members could get together and they would recover the funds without the need of any notary or any entity or government body to kind of prove or claim the funds that you had as an individual. So there's something, it's again like a protocol that we created, and again it's being used more and more with our competitors and both direct and indirect, the software wallets as well. And that I think is a great way how to think about this. And we have also some even hardware solution to this, something we call Trezor Keep Metal, which is this sort of tubular device where it's like a steel where you can punch in the words, and it's really water resistant, fire resistant, etc. So even if something happened to your flat, etc., it's very durable, and you can basically store the privacy keys in these devices. And again, with a little bit of your family sort of knowledge, and if you explain how that work, it really, this inheritance sort of practice is it can be good for the family, for example.
Do you know of many that are using that? Because I would imagine, like, to your point, like 5 shares, which is like 5 parts of this key, and you need any 3 of those people, let's say, to come
Exactly.
together to recover that. Is that something that you say that you're seeing is becoming more widespread? I could imagine, like, thinking about my own family and others, you need to be quite sophisticated to understand how important it is not to kind of all bring together and look at it. So, like, are you seeing that as still in a very early phases, or are you seeing a lot of adoption of such practices? What do you see on the ground?
Yeah, so we I think introduced this, if I'm not mistaken, 3, maybe even 4 years ago, and we were not pushing it too hard on our user base, right? So I agree with what you're hinting in a way. That's probably, you need to be a more sort of sophisticated user, or more educated user on how to use this. But it's actually, again, it's not very hard as long as you kind of understand the basic concept. So we've launched a new hardware device recently in June, and it's called Trezor Safe 5. And in the onboarding into the Trezor Safe 5 model, we actually now the Shammer is a default option. And what it means that you can still create just one share, and it's perfectly fine. But if you later on realize, okay, I now understand the game. I know what it is. I know how to send transaction. I know how to protect my backup and all those things. Then you can actually start creating more shares, and then and distribute basically the risk. But again, I understand it's perhaps a bit for more educated users. I would not even say more advanced, because again, it's not hard. It's just it's good that the users understand you exactly, that you know what you are doing. So now we are pushing this a bit more, let's say, forcefully onto the user base, because we believe users can benefit from using Shamir backup, or as we call it now, the multi-share backup.
Okay, awesome. Let's talk a little about the future. So obviously you said you've just released a new product, but what can you share with us? First of all, let's talk about like far future and then also near future. What are your views about how self-custody will become in the future? Like, when you guys think about where the company is going, are we going to be still holding these hardware wallets? Are we thinking about chips? Obviously, if you think about Neuralink, there's chips in people's heads and stuff. So just like give us the very big visionary perspective of how you guys as a company view the trajectory of self-custody.
Okay, so I would say the self-custody question starts with how many users are going to actually use Bitcoin and crypto. And again, I have some statistics in my presentations, and the
I'd love
current
to hear
numbers
them. Let's hear them. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's hear some of this.
The current numbers I'm working with in general is like, let's say there is 500 million crypto users combining Bitcoin and Bitcoin, probably the largest, which is I think like largest chunk, maybe 150 or 200 million, something like this. And the other cryptocurrencies also together, or like if you combine all the exchanges and all the UTXs from Bitcoin, etc. So let's say there's 500 million users. Now, if you combine the sales of us and our direct competitors, both big and small, you will get to a number of that only 2% of those 500 million are actually storing their private keys in hardware wallets. It's not a huge number. And now, why I think that is.
So we're talking about. Are we saying about? So there's been about 10 million hardware wallet units that have been sold effectively.
Okay. Exactly. Roughly 10 million if you combine the sales of all the hardware wallets together. So now you can say it's probably. I mean, it's not a big number, right? Like compared to how many users there are. And I think it's due to the fact that maybe we are coming from more the techie side of the industry, and maybe hardware wallets still have this sort of aura of being too difficult or too difficult to use, which I think is really changing quite a lot. And again, I think we are doing a lot for this, and our competitors as well. And I can imagine that this number will basically go up, both obviously the crypto users, but also the self-custody in hardware wallets, and we can see the trends is definitely going up. Our sales are going up. I mean, also the testament or the proof. When I joined the company, there was 30 of us. Now there's 200 of us, and we are self-funded, and we don't have any external capital. And we are doing well, and we are investing into future growth of the company. So the trend is, I think, quite obvious. Generally, Bitcoin price is by the way helping a lot. So whenever Bitcoin goes up, our sales goes up and goes up as well. So where is this headed? I think more people, and I hope more people will self-custody their coins. I think there's obvious that with the ETFs, etc., there will be sort of I would say with like the banks taking Bitcoin and crypto more seriously. I think obviously there will be sort of push to against there will be advising almost against self-custody, and of course we will always be on the other side of the spectrum where we will say it's superior if you self-custody your own coins, because that's how the whole idea of Bitcoin, the decentralization, was invented. That was the idea. Like don't rely on banks, right? Like the Genesis block, the first block ever mined, actually mentions the financial crisis of 2008, that crisis. So that was exactly the original idea of why Bitcoin was invented, and we would like to protect that idea by advising people on using self-custody. And okay, so to the question, how to do it? I think we will. We are creating a more and more user-friendly wallets that you can also connect with your mobile phone, use it in very easy ways. That's, by the way, something we are working on. That's our sort of next big goal to deliver that device to the market. And that's something we are planning for the next year. And
what specifically when you say connecting your hardware wallet to your mobile phone, you're saying, or what specifically?
Yes, exactly. So today you can connect your Android phone with Trezor devices through the cable, but the future device will have the Bluetooth connectivity, where basically we'll be able to do it wirelessly and seamlessly with iOS, with the Apple devices. So that's something we are working on.
Does that introduce more security risks though?
I mean, there are some. The protocol like as the Bluetooth sort of connection, has been sort of improving over the years quite a lot. So there is not a huge risk. But of course, for let's say some, like really security aware users, you can still connect the device through a cable. So we are actually working on that. You can still, use cable connection if you would be sort of how to say, afraid about using the wireless connection. But that being said, we are currently not aware of any huge risk or any sort of proven sort of attacks where people would use coins with our competitors through their Bluetooth connected devices.
Got you. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I don't know if you have any on this particular topic, but a lot of people are talking about, and there are certain projects that have been doing this about, your iris or any of your physical characteristics being either your public or private key. And I wanted to know if you had any thoughts on that, and whether those are good ideas or absolutely horrible ideas.
I would say biometrics in general might be good for authentication, such as getting access to your device, for example, instead of PIN code. So if you want to get into the device, you can either use your number that you have in your head, or you can use the iris or thumb or fingerprint or something like this. But in general, the idea of sort of deriving private keys, this kind of random thing out of your biometrics as a single thing that you would add to this mix is probably not the best idea, because then it's like a single thing that you have, right? Like then somebody could really steal it from you as well. As opposed to when you use this word list, those 2048 words, totally randomly. That's the idea. It's completely random. You cannot connect it to anything that you own. So I can imagine for sort of usability, that would be great to get again access, like authenticate to device that it's me. So let me in. Again, like as an example, for not using let's say the PIN, but something like this, like some biometric solution. But for the private keys, I'm not sure, to be honest.
I'm with you there. I think there are a lot of dangers that come with that. So one has to be very, very careful. Matej, your thoughts philosophically about looking into the future about centralized finance and decentralized finance, right? Mm-hmm. So obviously we have a lot of centralized exchanges like VALR and others. And more we have decentralized exchanges where you can go onto different protocols and swap out your coins one for another using different hardware wallets or software wallets or in any other way that you're holding your own assets. What are your views about that? Are they in tension? Do they go together? Is there space for both? Or do you see very clearly a particular trend and trajectory?
Yeah, so in general, we are definitely on the decentralized finance spectrum, right, as a company. And as a matter of fact, I was talking mainly about Bitcoin and sending transactions, but actually in our ecosystem that we call Trezor Suite, which is basically exactly what the name suggests, it's like a suite of services that you can download the desktop app or the mobile apps to your phone, and then you can do all those things that you would expect from from like an exchange. So you can buy, sell, you can use the decentralized exchange from token to token, within the same networks, across the whole range of networks, etc. So we try to introduce those services into our ecosystem as well. And again, generally we will be more in favor of the decentralized approach, because again, coming back to the idea, or the original idea of Bitcoin, that's why we are here as a company. To support sovereign individuals that don't have to be dependent on governments, central banks, or centralized institutions, such as banks, etc.
Absolutely, yeah. I think just to share a couple of views on that. So, at VALR, when we think about this, we think it's a beautiful option that people have to have self-custody, to be able to take their coins into their own, basically into their own safety, whatever that safety that they want to create is.
Right.
Our view is also that in the future, and now and into the future, we came from a self-custodial background where we had gold coins and physical bearer instruments, and everybody was. And a lot of people in crypto say, "Oh, we've always been centralized. We need to go decentralized." But actually, we were decentralized for a long time with people having their own bearer instruments, then saying, "You know what? I don't want to actually hold my own gold coins. Let me go and give it to the goldsmith and get a depository receipt, etc." So we've kind of gone on this pendulum, and I think we've gone from some decentralized world to centralized, where a lot of the centralized intermediaries stopped demanding or having or commanding the trust that they stopped having the trustworthiness that was demanded by the public. And then there was this movement to saying, listen, we don't know what's going on with our money supply. We know what's going on with the trustworthiness of our banks. So we're going to go decentralized. So I think, first of all, we support you guys very much. We love the choice for people, but we also believe that there's a need for new institutions that really are trustworthy, and that there is choice for people so that they can either have self-custody or have trustworthy institutions that can hold their funds for themselves. So I think this is going to be a very interesting trend to follow into the future. And we've seen DeFi really take off in a big way over the last few years, which has been wonderful to see. What are your predictions for the next 10 years for not necessarily just for Trezor itself, but for the crypto space in general? And I want to leave it as broadly as possible. So any element of the crypto space, your predictions for the next 10 years.
Yes, I will start with the numbers again. So you say there's 500 million crypto users today. I can really imagine there will be most of the world will use crypto in 10 years, meaning there'll be more than probably 4 or 5 billion users that are interacting with crypto in general. I can really imagine it even more. I don't know if it's going to be all the people, but I think it will be more than half of all the people in the world. I can really see that happening. I think there's multitudes of reasons. I think, again, I like to believe that it is mainly the idea of not being dependent, on governments and the central institutions. Right. But I also agree with you that the central institutions are, playing a certain role in the customer journey, etc. So we are seeing it. ETFs have definitely helped to probably gain awareness of a lot of people, and maybe some people will even start there, but they will realize, okay, it's kind of cool, but there are some, let's say, fees that I have to pay to the fund for, storing my sort of, option of Bitcoin, or, some kind of, like an asset, a form of Bitcoin, but not Bitcoin itself. So maybe I can try, to hold it myself, since it originally has been built for, the people. So I can imagine, that growing quite a lot. And I think these institutions will definitely go more into crypto and Bitcoin. I think governments and and banks will take Bitcoin even more seriously than now, even though that I think it's quite clear, like Bitcoin being the presidential election topic in the US. That's kind of crazy, right? Like absolutely didn't expect that. So I think that's really will lure more and more people into Bitcoin. And my not prediction, but a hope is that people will understand kind of these sort of decentralized function of Bitcoin and crypto. And it's not going to be just an investment asset such as stock or something like this, because that would be a bit of a pity, because then it would be the same thing, because then like no matter what the abbreviation or this thing says on your little trading app, it's better if you can really understand the decentralized aspect of it and hold it. Okay, maybe not even your own, but like at least through some level of knowledge through exactly like a trusted institution, or again ideally on your own. So I don't think that's a prediction. I think it's more of a hope, because I have no idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I'm not good. Yeah. I'm not good at these predictions. I think it's more of a hope, and I would say more of
Okay.
a something like a everyday job, to make sure that happens.
I think there's a lot of work to kind of create that
Exactly.
and make that hope a reality from all of us to just educate the public. There's a lot of misinformation still across the
Exactly.
world, from retail users to institutions. I recently
For
had
sure.
a call with one of the largest asset managers on the African continent, and
Mhm.
it was a very interesting call because there's still a lot of the trip ups that people had from several years ago are still in the minds of a lot of the people that are making the decisions about
Mhm.
creating crypto products for distribution in the traditional financial space. So there's a lot of
Mhm.
education that still needs
Right.
to be
Right.
carried out and
For
spread
sure.
across the world. So you're saying, so let's talk about it. If in your view, maybe 4 million users at least, or 4 billion users, excuse me, in the
Yeah.
next 10 years because of this huge like 10x growth that you hope to see. And are there views about how you will see that? Obviously, you see the price action, as you mentioned earlier, that gets people to pay more attention and to buy your devices. Are there other ways that you see that? How do you see that actually happening? Are there any? Um, is it just a slow kind of organic growth there, or like are there any other kind of avenues towards that end? And the reason I'm thinking about it is financial crises, etc. What do you see?
Yeah, I think probably the big institutions' involvement would be the first that comes to mind. I recently, I'm not going to name names, but like I recently sat with an interesting meeting with like this, just as a coincidence, with some big names in Bitcoin and this sort of banker that works for these like huge, institutions in Europe, and really we are talking like thousands and thousands of employees, etc. And they shared, they are getting into Bitcoin in the coming months, and it's like a huge bank, So I think again, like that, that will create the marketing message for probably a lot of people that didn't trust Bitcoin and crypto before, because to this day, I mean, I have friends reaching out, asking, okay, so what is this Bitcoin thing? Is it really worth it, or is it a scam, or what? What is it? So I think once it gets sort of the stamp from the trusted institutions. I mean, quote unquote trusted, because again, like, you should really not trust banks that much. But once these big institutions get in and they will offer it as a Bitcoin and crypto as a product to millions of their users,
Yeah.
I think the word will get out, and I think more and more people will get in. So again, I think it's the big institutions, is the government again. If the U.S. presidential elections topic is Bitcoin, and the one of the candidates are talking at the biggest Bitcoin conferences these days.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm not talking about whether they are my favorite candidates or whatever, but but it's the topic. It's simply the fact that that's the it's all of a sudden a topic for probably a lot of people. So yeah, I mean, we are seeing even states, taking to Bitcoin as a legal tender. So basically,
Yeah.
making Bitcoin the dominant, let's say, value transmitter, or how to put it. So I think we are seeing that as well. Yeah, I think those are the avenues how we will get to the number of billions of people using Bitcoin and crypto. And again, my hope is that that all these people will understand where it originated from and what is the original idea. Kind of like you said with the gold, that we started with the self custody, then we then had to rely on the institutions. Kind of makes sense, and now I think it'd be great to go back to the where we started
Self
to the
custody.
roots. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I agree with you in many respects. I think the fact that Bitcoin is a presidential issue in the United States, the fact that Trump was speaking at a Bitcoin conference, the fact that all parties are actually looking at what this means for their
Yeah.
own policies, I think is huge. And I think is, we're like just over 15 years after the invention of Bitcoin, which is kind of crazy that this is happening so quickly. Actually, right?
Exactly.
That's not a long time. And I think also, I think we will start to see a variety of things from crises in the traditional financial system to technological progress with, fees or L2s or a whole bunch of things in the crypto space that should lead towards more adoption. But I also do think that there's probably going to be some more regulatory headwinds in front of us as
Right.
people start to realize that crypto and Bitcoin in particular are potentially threats to some of the status quo that we have in the world. So I think it will really, I think it's going to determine what the future jurisdictions of note are going to be, those that embrace this technology or those that kind of try to shun it. So it's going to be a very interesting thing, but I agree. I think both ways crypto is becoming a much more important narrative in society, I think. So
Yeah, for sure. And I actually like that you mentioned the technological innovation. For some reason, I didn't talk about that, but like the second layers and third layers and whatever layers. I think and the fees getting lower. I think that's all kind of great to see that we are working on this as a whole industry. For us as well as a company, we are really thinking of how to make sure Bitcoin transactions are basically cheaper if whether we implement Lightning and all those kind of technologies. So I think it's definitely an important part of it. And maybe coming back to the beginning of the interview, and I introduced myself, I kind of love that we can do it through the technology and like digital, that we can work on this as a together, the whole industry. And I have strong belief that we will make it happen, right? Like I have strong belief that there are basically ways technologically how can we address this, and it doesn't have to be sort of legal innovation, which actually the kind of the legal thing is more like a constraints for us, because as you mentioned, the threat of all kind of regulations, etc. But I believe you can find the technological solutions that are fast, scalable, cheap, ultimately, etc. And that's something I'm really looking forward, to
that's the
working
goal.
on.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Last couple of questions, and then I'm going to ask you, actually, right at the end, I'm going to ask you a question, which is there a question that you've never been asked in a podcast or an interview that you should have been asked, and what your answer
Okay.
to that is? So just keep that in the
Okay.
back of your mind. But before we get
Okay.
there, just a few specifics, like on Trezor. So are you able, or are you at liberty to disclose how many units altogether that Trezor specifically has sold?
We are not giving the specific numbers, but if you
Okay,
don't mind me say, we are talking about like millions, smaller
got you.
millions, let's say,
Okay, awesome.
digits of millions sold.
And where do you guys manufacture? Is that also public information or not really?
That's fine. I can say that we have manufacturers in Czech Republic, which is kind of cool because we also provide, I guess, jobs and opportunities locally. It's also nice to have kind of the oversight, so you can just like hop on the car and go to our manufacturer, which is cool. But that being said, as we are scaling production, we are now looking. We are actually getting into partnerships with Asian manufacturers as well. So that's a kind of new experience for us and something we consider.
Awesome. And when you guys think about like the 400 or 500 million users right now, and you said that like the total amount of units that have been sold of hardware wallets is about 10 million. What are your
Mm-hmm.
goals, and like what do you think is realistically, like as far as the growth trajectories have been? Like what are you guys aiming for in the next 1 year to 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's almost the question I've never been asked and should have been asked. It's a good question. So I think we have this kind of nice story. So we have a certain number of devices that we sold in the last 10 years that I mentioned, like the digits of millions of sold devices. And we would like to make it double in over the next bull market. And we are doing everything we can to make that happen. So, heavy production plan, investing a lot into our stock, because that's something, by the way, is very specific about the hardware company. I kind of am jealous of you guys, like, working on software mainly, because the hardware
Yes,
is really hard,
it
because
is.
in a way that you have to, create it, it takes some time. There's like a big lead times for the components, then the manufacturing time. and you have to make sure you kind of hit it at the right time with the right numbers, right? Because if you don't have enough stock, you're fucked because you're losing money because you're not selling and your users are coming to the competitors. If you have too much on the stock, then you're facing the risk of your product being sort of too old to be sold, in the coming years. Right. So kind of hit the balance is quite hard with consumer electronics because you have to kind of optimize this, quite well.
Fascinating. Awesome. Matej, is there another question that people should have asked, or is that the one?
I mean, I really like this one, to be honest. I don't think I was asked this specifically, so I think that was cool. The only thing that came to my mind is not actually a question for me. I think it was a question for you, because to turn it around, because the interviews are usually one-sided, but also I wanted to ask about your plans actually. So what is your midterm and maybe long-term vision for what you want to do? I would say in Africa in general, because you guys mentioned you are the biggest one, which I think is a great thing. So I was just really wondering what's on your mind, if it's okay to ask.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking. So we started in 2018, so we're about half your age as Trezor. We are a centralized exchange. We started off with just spot trading pairs. Then we moved to spot margin, and now we've recently, launched a perpetual futures. And we're the largest, as I mentioned, in South Africa and Africa as far as trading volume is concerned, by quite a big margin. But what we've been working on recently is moving much more into the international territory. So we're not going to the United States because of regulatory reasons. Right. In South America, we could potentially look there, but there are many players that are there, and we're not focusing too much there. We have many customers that are from East Asia, and so we have also now a growing team in East Asia. Our size, we're about just half your size as well. So we're half in age and also half in size. We're about just over 100 employees at VALR now, and we're really trying to expand quite aggressively into East Asia. Just because there's a huge adoption in that population. And our aspiration is really, we feel that finance needs to be much better. Humanity deserves much better from a perspective of lower costs, from the perspective of quicker speed, and from the perspective of having institutions that really put the needs and interests of the customers first, rather than always. It almost feels in traditional finance that a lot of customers, and particularly in Africa, are being taken advantage of. Oftentimes standard remittances cost 10% of the amount that you're sending. And to me, that's almost criminal, right? So what we're really trying to do is just to serve humanity. And we believe, as I mentioned to you, that there'll be many people that want to do self-custody. But we also believe that there's some benefits to having a centralized, trusted intermediary, which we hope to and aspire to be, where people can have high transaction volume, use our API that's very advanced, and then once they've bought, to move their funds onto a Trezor wallet or other hardware wallets or other custody solutions. But really, we view ourselves collaboratively working with players like you and even other centralized exchanges, just to make the world a better place. So really, that's our aspiration, to see how we can serve humanity and society.
Nice. I like it. It's a nice mission and vision.
Thank you so much, Matej, and thank you so much for your time. And hopefully we'll have several more conversations. Best of luck. We look forward to hearing about your sales numbers going up and the bull market being in full swing. But thanks very much for your time.
Likewise.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot for having me, guys, and good luck. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.